So I love doing Facebook Lives. Every once in a while, I do an Instagram Live or I record a video on TikTok. Listen to me, record a video. So Gen X right there. I like doing lives. I don't go into them with any plan. I let the conversation take me. A lot of my podcasts are actually the same way. I have a sort of a moderate plan and idea. But as I start episode 229, which is today, which is January 14th, you'll hear this in less than a week. I have no plan. I've been so sick, like passed out, sleeping 18 to 20 of 24 hours, 3 or 4 days in a row. I don't get sick like this much. And it's been eye-opening, even though my eyes have been closed for the better part of 5 days. But I'm just going to do this sort of a live because, as is the case with me, when I'm forced to be still, even if I'm delirious and incoherently thinking, which could be the norm for me, I do have things that come to mind and experiences to share. So this podcast episode will be along the lines of a Facebook Live. So of course, I'm not driving to CrossFit Amesbury to coach. I'm in my house, which sadly right now is my least favorite place to be. And let me be clear, I have a wonderful family and I love being a mom and I love the people in my house. It's a very, very unhealthy environment for me right now. And it's hard to reconcile that or figure out how to fix it. I get overwhelmed and binge TV shows, which when you're sick is an easy thing to do as well. So I'm going to start off in the mode of TV show binging. So Stranger Things, of course, I never watched it when it first came out. It was right after Molly died. I had no interest in anything related to something new without Molly. It's hard to explain how that was. Gracie got into it. I just wasn't. And then it was coming home from Florida, I think 2018 maybe, or 2019. It was before Jack, or it was right when Jack was born. So it was right around there that we watched it and I binged. I think 2 seasons were out and I binged them all. I don't know. But anyway, I got into it. Of course, waiting for season 5. And then when season 5 was coming, rewatching the entire series with Gracie and having some together time. But I was watching in season 5, the last season, there's a new dynamic that takes place. So you don't just have, if you don't watch Stranger Things, this is going to mean nothing to you. But the general gist is there's reality and then there's the upside down, this alternate sort of parallel universe. It reminds me of Stephen King and the Langoliers. It reminds me of every time travel movie I've ever seen where you're in a place that you know, but you're not there at all. And so there's a new reality, a new place. There's the wormhole and all these alternate realities that you can exist in. And one of them is inside of Vecna's mind. And Vecna is the big giant monster who really is Henry, this very troubled little boy. And so you're in his mind and living through his fears and memories and realities. And Holly is the little sister of a couple of the main characters who you don't really get to know at all until season 5. She and Max, who's in the coma / catatonic state, are inside of Henry's memory. And they're in a cave, which is relatively safe. And Holly doesn't know what to do, and Max is sort of mentoring her and trying to help her. So Max is sort of alive and moving around in Vecna's memory because he's the one that placed her in catatonia, if that makes sense. So anyway, they're sitting in a cave. And Max is, 16 years old or 17 at the time, giving advice to Holly. And she talks about 3 realities. When you're stuck in a place like this, when you're going through what they're going through, there are 3 realities. So choice 1 is to fight the monster. So the literal meaning here is to fight Vecna, to get a knife and a gun and try to kill him and, mortal combat. And of course, that might be cathartic and might seem like the logical thing to do, but it's also exhausting. You stand the chance of losing. You're fighting an enemy that's much bigger than you. So choice 2 would be sort of to accept your fate and wait for help, to just sit back and do nothing and wait for somebody to come save you. Now, that's a safe reality because, the status quo remains the same. You're alive, but you're stuck in this random place. And then number 3, choice 3 would be believe in yourself. Believe in yourself that you have what it takes to make the decisions and execute the actions that will get you out of your reality. I loved it. I backtracked it, rewound it, and listened to it a couple of times. And it stayed in my head. And I thought, all right, I'm sick. I haven't planned. Well, I have 2 or 3 episodes planned, but not ready to record. And so I've just been, feeling sorry for myself. Like, okay, I pay all this money to have a podcast and I don't do a good job of it. And what am I doing? All the self-degradatory things. So I came up with choice 4, which is for me, which is just give in to the monster. The fight is exhausting. No one's going to come help me. And I'm just so fucking tired. And that's how I've been feeling sort of the last several days. And so I don't have any big proclamation about how I'm going to believe in myself and, somehow supersede over the monster. You get that I don't have an actual monster I'm fighting. The monster is very metaphorical for everything in my life. Brings me back to my reading with Molly, which I talked about last week, and how part of me feels like a failure. But that's my chosen response, I guess. how to set myself up so I can prove that I'm a failure. If I can't choose unhealthy friendships and get taken advantage of by other people, I can treat myself like shit. It's an interesting sort of circular spiral that I keep coming back to. But I have felt overwhelmed. My house is a mess. In the motherland theme where I'm mothering everybody, I've probably been as sick, if not sicker, than Jack and my mother. And I have still had to do 80% of my normal household chores and a lot of caring for Jack. Now, I'm Jack's mother. So even sick, I get it. He's going to come to me. We spent a lot of time sleeping in the bed together and that sort of thing. But it's hard for me to come down into my living room and my entire family is just sitting on the couch scrolling on their phones while puke-filled blankets and dirty dishes and unpaid bills and, just everything just stops. Everyone's just waiting for me somehow. And I find that hard. Do I set that reality up? I don't know. Maybe I do. I don't know. But that's where I've been. I've been just in a yucky place. So the other thing I do when I'm not feeling well is I sort of follow the pathway and find shows to watch. And I don't know how much I talked about the Big C last week, but Laura Linney is one of my favorite actresses. It was one of those weird connections that I shared with Roy. He loves the actress Laura Linney, and so we watched a gazillion movies with her in them. And her characters are all sort of similar. They're very strong-willed and not always agreed upon with women. So I binged that whole series, and of course it's about death and tragedy and a boy losing his mother and all of these things that happen. What I liked about it was how it flowed back and forth between sort of the heavenly realm and the spiritual reality and actual reality. There were 2 or 3 scenes in that movie that were not actual. They were either somebody's sort of pre-death premonition or they were a dream. And I love when TV shows do that. So I finished that and I'm like, okay. And then I thought, all right, well, what can I watch next? And so I'm just sort of tooling around Netflix, which has a lot of these like nice limited series. And I found one called The Way Home. And what I like about it is it reminds me of Sullivan's Crossing. It reminds me of Sweet Magnolias. It reminds me of Firefly Lane. There are these shows that aren't really super well written. The acting isn't great, even though some of the actors are phenomenal. You can't act well on a poorly written script, so you watch it and you're like, okay, this is kind of tacky. But it's your classic move away when you're 18, live your life, come back to your small town in Northeast Canada and find happiness and all that. So it's one of those kinds of movies. But it deals with 2 things. It deals with time travel and it deals with loss. So in this story, a woman named Kat and her daughter Alice go up to New Brunswick, to a little town called Port Haven that probably doesn't exist, but to go back to where she grew up. And in the process of going back, Alice, the daughter, falls into a lake, a pond, which takes her back to when her mother was in high school. And so now she's time traveling and she goes back a bunch of times. So now you have 2 parallel things going on. You have the story of Kat's, the mother, and also Alice's best friend, and then in this reality, Alice's mother, reliving 2 family tragedies. One is the disappearance of the brother Jacob, who was 8 when he disappeared, and the other is the death of her father just like 6 months later. So in regards to the realities around a grieving family, the show is fantastic. And it's actually been a really good outlet for me in my feeling so utterly sick and discouraged and defeated. I get kind of pissy with the main character, Kat, and I realize that I get pissy with her because I think she reminds me of me. She hangs on to things. She doesn't listen. She refuses to let go. And I think sometimes that's me. I'm sort of getting the message as I talk right now, that I hold on so tightly to things that I think I'm mad at someone else and really I'm mad at myself. And so I was just watching her and just getting irritated with her character. What's fun about it, though, is the number of questions that get answered with time travel. And of course, that makes me wish I could time travel back and watch my life and rewatch things I maybe have forgotten in regard to my journey to losing Molly and how much, if anything, I actually played in that. The TV series does a great job of keeping the time travel ambiguous. You find out about something that happened 20 years ago, and then you realize that the people going back in time are the ones that caused what happened to happen. So how does that work? Yeah, it's just interesting. It makes me want to watch Kate and Leopold again and The Time Traveler's Wife and any other movie about time travel. I think that would be fascinating. So that's what I've been binging. It's been cathartic, although the third thing I've been doing a ton of is sleeping. So I know I'm really sick when I sleep because I'm not a good sleeper in general. 2 of the past 4 days, I slept, I would say 80% of the day. Like I woke up at 9 and slept from 10 to 12 and then from 1 to 3 and then went to bed at 5 and then woke up at midnight and then like just sleeping. But in this sick influenza, stuck at home, called out on 2 Thursdays and 2 Fridays of coaching, The only thing I've done is go to school board meetings, and that's primarily because they're hugely important meetings, and I just feel like we have no history on the school board anymore, and these decisions need perspective. I've never felt so useless and helpless and necessary at the same time on the school board as I do now. It's an interesting reality. We'll see how it plays out as the year goes along. I've been doing that. I've been binging the TV shows. I've been pondering time travel. I've been wanting to watch those movies again. And I've been really trying to examine in a healthy way my propensity for calling myself the victim. Like, yep, of course, it's me that has to do this. Yep, no one else helps. Yep, it's always me, which is true. If I were to accurately describe the last week, no one else has called out of their jobs or given up responsibilities or said no or not earned money or, not written their email on time. Like I said to Kenny, I wish you got sick because you're not missing anything. I could take care of you and do all of my stuff and coach and the house would be clean. I get sick and nothing happens. And that's whiny and mean, but it really is truly how I feel. It's just interesting sort of be stuck in that pattern, that mindset. So right now it's Wednesday afternoon and the heat is blaring. And so I'm feeling a little warm, but I think that might be fever. I'm going to mask up and go to my school board meeting in a little bit. Hopefully I can offer some good input to everything that's going on and try not to discourage myself on the upcoming year and what do I do next. I said last week that I really felt like I was at a fork in the road, and I am. I recorded that podcast on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then I got sick. Like I got sick immediately. So I've done nothing. I drove home from Amesbury on Thursday and didn't leave the house again until Monday night. That's been my reality. Hopefully my editor is editing out all my hacking and coughing because it's ugly. So 2026. So in trying to stay away from New Year's resolutions, I looked back over the last few Januaries of my life and they've been terrible. January is a terrible month for me. If I measure it by goal setting and jumping right in and getting started. I did the whole healthy thing. I ate really healthy and did all that. I had this incredibly healthy year, 2023 to 2022 to 23. Let me tell you, so I turned 60. So it was 2023, that whole year into 24, I just took care of myself. I ate healthy. I took good care and all this. But I remember that January, I took off all this time to take care of Kenny because he had to have surgery. And I never went back to coaching at Battle and I just lost things. And then we went on vacation and I didn't eat well and I drank a little bit and then I lost that. And I feel sometimes that what makes this environment unhealthy for me is that I'm surrounded by a lifestyle that other people want me to have that makes them comfortable and that I've been a part of for a long time. And it's incredibly hard to break out of it. There's this thing in AA called a geographical cure. And I remember when I first started, they would say that these things didn't work, but I would have to disagree because the geography, where you are and who you're with, is the habitual piece of your addiction, not the alcohol, like the addiction to the chemical itself. So, for example, I remember in the years after Molly died, when I was really heavily using Coke, when I was at Disney or out of Concord, I didn't even think about it. Like it was very, very easy for me to not do it. The minute I was home and I was in the realm of, oh, here I am in my living room and it's this time of day and this time of night, boom, my desire to get high came right back. And I know in Kenny's complete inability to stop drinking, he's an evening drinker. So if he's home in the evenings, I have little faith that he will ever quit drinking. And so, what do I do with that? Especially when I'm trying so hard not to. And if I have one little waiver, it's a celebratory event for him. Yay, she wants to drink. Woohoo. And that's hard to cope with sometimes, 2026 podcast wise, I don't know. I'm hoping my dear sweet Paris-bound daughter will be willing to do episodes with me every 3 or 4 weeks. Going to try to get her to record a few before she goes. But I would love to share her progress with the world on the pod. That would be fun. I want to have more guests. So I don't know how to look at analytics myself. I listened to this other podcast, Allie on the Run, and I mean, she has a bunch of people that do all this for her, but she had episode by episode analytics and how many people listened and the most popular episodes and the most downloads and all this information, which I suppose is right at my fingertips. But if I don't even have time to record a podcast episode on time, when am I going to ever give myself the time to sit down and learn how to look at all this? I'm into year 5 of my podcast and I've learned nothing. I blame this on myself, but I get discouraged that way. So I had a lot of interesting topics of conversation. What I did was I wrote out all of my episodes I did in 2025, and they were great. I talked about IVF and birth control and period stigma, so all the lady stuff. I talked about going to Bali. I talked about being angry. I talked about dead Molly money and grief and don't tell me how to grieve. Lots of grief episodes, which will be a lifetime part of my podcast for sure. And then I did the season of guests, and I had some amazing people on here. If you're on Spotify or my website or anywhere, wherever you get your podcast, they're all on there. But if you've never listened to any of my guest episodes, I talked to some amazing people. And one of my favorite part about guest episodes is how much I learned from them. So I talked to Emily Sukenick, who's a girl I coached at Concord High School. She was a high liner. She'd walk a high line across 3,000 feet elevation. Craziness. I talked with Little A. She was my first ever babysitter, a former student and runner of mine, and how she has navigated her traumatic childhood into an unbelievably healthy adulthood. A friend of mine, Michelle from CrossFit Amesbury, talked about this balance therapy that she does. It's very, very neurological in nature. I talked to my sister Eleanor a couple of times. She's a fun one to listen to. You should listen to both of the Eleanor episodes if you haven't. I talked to Skylar. Skylar was a student at Concord High School a bit after I left who had massive, massive addiction issues and the whole ugly reality. And she's got a husband and 3 kids, and it's not easy for her, but she's pulling it off. That was a really honest episode. I talked to a woman named Shawnee, whose daughter Bailey was the one that got picked up by human traffickers and got let off, but ended up getting hit by a car and killed. That's a horrifying story. Then I talked with Tim Andrews. So Tim Andrews, when I interviewed him, he had just gotten a pig transplant. It was a year ago in January. He received a pig kidney, and that lasted a few months, and then they had to remove it. And so he's been on the list, and he just had a kidney transplant a couple of days ago. So he now has a human kidney. So he'll be sure to be a return guest. Can't wait to talk to him again. I talked to my roommate from college, Marty Shea, who I love so much, just about running and what it was like to be an athlete in the 80s, back when female-bodied humans didn't have a place in athletics, and how hard it can be to be a female athlete now. My friend Brenda, who has achondroplasia, which is the actual medical term for dwarfism, and there are, of course, very many different types of that. That was fascinating. I talked to my friend Jen. She's a mortician. She's a funeral director. Fascinating. All of these people, everyone that I talk to has some element of spirituality in their belief system that allows them to see themselves bigger than the universe. Like life is bigger than this, which is super helpful in their stories. I talked to a woman named Kelsey, she was one of Jack's breast milk donators when I was nursing Jack. I got a lot of donated breast milk, which was fantastic. And she gave me a ton of milk and colostrum and all that good stuff. Tammy Roby, a former coaching compatriot of mine, she wrote a book, Misdiagnosed for Miles, and she has a disorder which is really long, and I should have written it down before I brought her back up. But you should Google her and order her book and read it, especially if you're a female-bodied human. Women get really, really poorly treated by the medical community all the time. And she spent 10 years unnecessarily in her life suffering from almost tragic conditions, and she knew what was wrong with her all along, pretty much. So Tim and his wife Karen, their daughter, so Tim was the pig kidney dude. Their daughter Gabrielle was a Walker School student of mine, so I talked to her about what it was like to go through this from far away. And then there's this podcast called The Life Shift, which I love, and Matt Galuli is the host of that, and he interviews people. Most of his episodes are interviews, and it's about people who had a life shift moment where life was one way and then it was another. And he's really working hard to really make his podcast a go. I should probably take the leap and do the same thing. Then I talked to a kid named Patrick. So this is interesting now. Let's do these 4 guests in a row. I have 20-year-old Patrick. Then I have 40-year-old Matt. Then I have 60-something Margaret. Then I have 40-something Danielle. And then I have mid-30s Stephen and Evelyn Kidder. So all different age groups, all talking about really incredible things. Patrick wrote a book called The Happiness Continuum. He's 20. Yep, that's right, 20. He wrote a book, self-published it. He sold, I think, between 500 and 1,000 copies. It's fantastic. Another one you should order and read. Danielle was a friend of mine. She's a Facebook friend who knows all these people I know. She's one of those people that every time I meet somebody or I talk to somebody, we both know that person. She's like everywhere, kind of like me. And she took care of a girl named Lexi for a couple of years while Lexi battled brain tumors and ultimately died from her cancer. I had Evelyn and Stephen Kidder, who lost their sister in a car crash and their brother to complications of seizure related to alcoholism. So their mom has lost 2 of her 4 children to pretty tragic experiences. And so we just talked about what that trauma was like. Now I knew Stephen and Evelyn because I coached Leslie. I knew their whole family. And so I have so many memories of them. So it was interesting to retouch base with them. But I think one of my favorite interviews was with a woman named Margaret Porter. And Margaret is every bit the class and stature and poise and elegance that you would expect really from British royalty is almost how I feel. She's just well spoken and articulate. And she shared a grief loss, a loss story of a brother that she didn't remember. This was before car seats, and she was in a car accident. Her mother and she and her baby brother, who was an infant, just a couple of months old, were in a car accident, and she survived and her baby brother didn't. So here's a baby that she really has no conscious recollection of, but his loss painted and illustrated and guided her whole life. It was one of those stories that makes you realize the depth of grief and loss and the magnitude of human connection because her love for her brother that she didn't know and her sadness in his loss and her questions around the behaviors of her parents and the people in her town and her utmost respect for their privacy and their piece of the story was profound. It was one of those episodes that didn't need really any editing. She's flawless. She's also a well-published author, Margaret Porter, so she does historical fiction and she's fantastic. So those were some of the guests I have, right? I had some amazing people on. So I'm looking to have more guests, and I think the guests I like are regular local people that have gone through really irregular major things. So when I look at if I'm going to be willing to set any podcast goals, it would be that. I've toyed with the idea of cutting back on how many episodes I do. I spend a lot of money on this. I don't put into it the effort I should. I'm thinking if I can maybe post more frequently short things that don't require so much editing and creating. I don't know. Maybe I just need to put it all away, go get a job in a school somewhere. Sometimes I just feel like that's what I should do. Then I'd somehow not be spending all my money and be happier. I don't know. I do know that sitting here is something I love to do. So we'll have to see. And then I had some big episodes. So a big one for me was Science Guy died. So Coach Bruce McMahon, his death affected me profoundly. I cried for days, and it affected his daughter. And she and I don't talk as much as we did. And I think the reality of what he was to people up here was hard for her. She had repaired so many wounds, and to hear some of the vitriol that people felt they had the right to spew was hard on her, and rightfully so. But that process also cut into my ability to really publicly grieve and mourn him, because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have started running. And one of the toughest responses to read was somebody who knows me really well, who really blasted me for giving him any credit for my running. And he went on to say, "You're a hard worker," but I wouldn't have gone out for track. I was asthmatic. When I went out for track, I didn't plan on running. The only reason I went out for track was to be near Bruce. That was it. There was no other reason. And so I wouldn't have started running if it weren't for him. It's just one of those juxtapositions of good, bad, ugly, pretty, whatever, that life seems to throw my way. I talked about the truth of what happened to me at Bow High School with my cross-country coaching job there and how anger producing that remains for me. I have a very hard time with people trying to make light of that and people saying nothing bad happened to me and the people involved looking at me like, what's the big deal? Okay, well, you weren't raked over the coals for no reason. That's the big deal. And I look at a team that had 46 girls on my last day of coaching that barely tops 20 now. And that makes me sad because there are 25 girls at Bow that would be running cross country right now if I were the coach there that aren't. And one of them could be a state champion, and one of them might cure her depression, and another one might lower her cholesterol, and another one might make new friends. Who knows? But yeah, there's that. And then I started spilling the tea, which is where the Science Guy in the Bow episode came from. And I've been wanting to really talk more honestly about what happened to me at Concord High School and then Robin and Lenora. And those take preparatory time. And I do not live in a house that affords me any of that time. And that was sort of hard to hear when I went for my reading, that my reality here is not going to change. Neither my mother nor Kenny have the ability to give me the space I need. They just don't. And so if I stay here, that will just continue. So what does it mean to not stay here? Does it mean to move out and live somewhere else? Does it mean to spend more money and rent an office? I don't know. I don't know what it means, but I do know I am more at the end of my rope than I've been in a long time. Maybe that's just the flu talking right now, but I'm in a place where I'm just in a place. Let's leave it at that. So it's Wednesday. This one will come out in, 6 days. And then hopefully between now and then I'll record a couple more. I'd like to get some Gracie episodes in, and then I'll try to get back to some semblance of an organized podcast. That's what I'll do. I do get wonderful feedback. I get amazing feedback from people that listen, and I should focus more on the feedback that I get that's positive than the self-flagellation I tend to put upon myself. Jack is playing with Joey, which means life is good. Kenny's at the Y, which means Kenny's at the Y. My mother's upstairs. Gracie's somewhere. And I'm going to chug a bunch of Dayquil and go sit at a school board meeting and make believe I'm a useful part of the group. That's what I'm going to do. And hopefully next week, well, when I record the next one, I hope I sound a little bit better than I do right now. So anyway, that's my Facebook Live version of a podcast episode, a real in the moment, what's going on now, how I feel sort of thing. And if you have any ideas for podcast guests or episodes or I ask a lot, but I'll ask again, shoot them my way or tell someone to tell me. I don't know. Send me a carrier pigeon with a little note tied to its leg. Put a message in a bottle and chuck it in the ocean. Yeah, all those things. So anyway, be good to yourself. Try not to get sick. Be good to someone else. Try not to get them sick. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Thanks for listening. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at Barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.